Okay, maybe we can wait a bit while people is moving in and out.
Yes, I think this one and the last one is the things that you guys cannot be missed because it's like very interesting session.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me please give it a bit time. So see, Mr. Nitin is ready now?
Yes.
Okay.
ค่ะ
So let's give a big hand to Mr. Nitin, please.
Hello. Okay. It seems that everyone's left the room, but hopefully we can get them back. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to invite one of the two distinguished guests first. Let me first start with Niliesh Kumar. He's the Digital Channels and Experience Head of Citibank Singapore, and he's a financial services leader with a proven track record of leading digital businesses and large-scale business transformation programs. Thank you, Niliesh. And our second distinguished guest from a regulator in Hong Kong. Chi-wai is the Fintech Director of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority with key focus on data initiatives. And he's going to be joining us as well on this chat. So I think before we begin with the interesting topic of open data, I think it's important to level set what does open data really mean for us, right? So based on our understanding, and open data is an ability to share data without any restrictions in a digital ecosystem that we are all in, right? And this is not a new concept, right? If you recall in 2000s, right, when information was available on newspapers, research topics, there was data available, which was open data even then, right? But of course, it wasn't necessarily customer data, right? Then we moved into the age of internet, right, where electronically information was available, and therefore we used to get some open data even then. Thereafter came an age where the data initiatives are started to be looked at from APIs, open banking side, and today we are in that age, right? And this is where we have Niliesh going to be talking about it as well as Chi-wai, right? Just a few examples of where open data has been successful and where regulators have taken some important steps. I come from Singapore, and in Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has been using or providing for Singapore Fintech's data, right? And that's used very commonly by the customers today and the banks, right, to share data very openly and very securely, right, in order to be able to derive information for their own purposes, which is the customer experience side, as well as from a provider perspective. There's Hong Kong Monetary Authority. They've taken some initiatives as well on how to enable banks to use open APIs, right, and to be able to exchange information across banking sector and financial services more collaboratively, as Chi-wai will talk a little bit more. And of course, then there is the West side, where in Europe, this is a very common concept of using open data, right, when it comes to offering financial services products and experiences. So let me maybe get Niliesh to first of all talk a little bit more about how has Citi embraced the concept of open data, and what would be the couple of key use cases that he would like to share with us from a provider perspective for Citibank.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to start with a quote, and that is something like, if you want to be incrementally better, then compete. If you want to be exponentially better, then collaborate. That's the fundamental thinking line behind open data, open banking, open finance. We'll be using those words interchangeably, but it's about like how do we partner, how do we collaborate, and how do we go about it. Initially, and I think the way Nitin was talking about, banks were talking about come to us, and there was a branch, and customers used to visit the branch. Slowly we evolved into internet banking, but even those remote access was come to my website, come to my app. But now customers evolved, they are spoiled as well in that sense. They want to be in their environment. And this is where open banking and open data helps to set the stage. That's where from a customer's point of view, it will be helpful. There are multiple models about open banking and open data. The common ones are what EU and Australia have done, where regulators have pushed down to say every bank will do it. Is there something wrong in it? No. There are advantages of doing that way as well. At least it brings everybody at par. Bare minimum services that is required, it comes to that point of view. Then came other model, which was by competition. Suddenly somebody was doing something which was of my purpose or my need as a financial organization. That was the second one. Let's say the account aggregators who were doing the screen scraping and ensuring, and even it was not secure, but still collecting and keeping the information with them. Then it was organizational need, in which even for this same example, if we take somebody was doing the screen scrapping, they have changed it. We worked as a partner with them to say, can I give you this securely? At least my customer data is safe. That can be the incentive. Or Citi as an example, and I'll go to the examples now. Citi as an example was dealing with a lot of white label partners. And when we talk about white label partners, they are somebody who are not showing Citi as the name, but are using the Citi infrastructure, the banking license, and all other things inside. And they're just portraying the screen that we can provide you this particular card. That one example, and I would go all the way back to 2016, 17. Because of those white label partners, it was always a secured lease line with them. It used to take months of work. All the API, all the work that was happening was independent for each of them. We quickly realized as and when open banking model was starting appealing, and I'll use open banking at this point, and I'll explain if we are not clear later in terms of all three, the differences that we're talking about. And the time that was like 12 months or even longer, once we published APIs, the white label partnership was to 1, immediately grew to 5, because that model was working for a lot of people. Banks of Queensland, Suncorp, Qantas, all other, like there are various use cases partners who started using it. SG Fintech is another example I think Nitin talked about. Again, a similar example for a regulator coming in rather than driving. What it did was it elevated everybody. That everybody has to come and start showing their bare minimum information and share with the partner. Now, regulator coming into play along with that, it helps, it builds that trust, it takes away that biases from customers' mind, or even as a trust for a competition bank that they might be misusing the data. And it elevated the entire ecosystem to say, yes, you have to have an open banking infrastructure, you need to have an open banking environment. So there are multiple use cases that we did. We will talk through while we are discussing more, but I'll let Chi-wai add more to it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for BOT having me here. And I think this is actually very interesting composition of this Fireside chat, because we have someone from the consulting and also someone from the banking industry. While I can share some more from as a regulator point of view, instead of like a regulator, because my role is a little bit different. I'm actually a facilitator inside a regulator. So it's more like taking a facilitation role on how to facilitate a data initiative, in particular how to share open data for the benefit of like banking industry. So after a brief introduction of my role, I would suggest on what Niliesh was asking me to do to introduce more. Firstly, I think we have to define what exactly is an open data from different angles. So from my understanding, I think it basically comprised of like 3 different types of banking data, open data. First one is the banking data, where it could be like a transactional data or cash flow data from a bank statement, something like a bank statement perspective. Second one is like a commercial data, where it could be some kind of like a payment data, operating data, sales record. That could be legitimate data that will be for the corporate, for for the benefit of a corporate. The third type of data is kind of like government data, where it could be some data by the government agencies, such as the Inland Revenue data, companies registry data, or land registry data. These three types of data, we believe, could be very beneficial for the banking industry. And that's why I have been hired by the HKMA to look after these types of data on how can be shared to the banking industry. And if I was to ask about what's HKMA's view on embracing these data, so I guess I can share two initiatives here. The first one, I guess, has been mentioned is the Open API, which is to facilitate bank-to-bank data sharing. From Bank A to Bank B, we have developed an Open API framework since 2018, and we have been implementing the Open API in a phased approach. This year, actually, we are also opening another phase of Open API to enable interbank account data sharing as well. I'll share a bit more later. And the second initiative that I'd like to briefly introduce is we call it a commercial data interchange, which it's mainly I'm responsible for. For the second type of data that I was introduced, commercial data, which could be operating data by the corporates, that will help the corporates to get some use case that will be beneficial for them. So commercial data interchange, it's a project that we launched last year. We can source the sales record of a particular corporate and then share with a bank in a consent-based manner. With this, the bank can potentially offer a better loan for the corporate because of these legitimate data. So I'll give it a pause here that I have shared two initiatives that shows HKMA's commitment on how to share data.
No, thanks. Thanks, Niliesh and Chi-wai, for sharing how open data is getting embraced by, let's say, a provider, as well as how regulators are collaborating with the providers. My other area, which probably many of us have would like to get a better understanding around, is what's the vision, right? We were talking about the evolution, right? What would be the vision of use of open data for a provider like Citibank? Maybe that would be my next thing for Niliesh.
Yeah, so certainly we can go in it. And now I will ride on to what Chi-wai was talking about. He talked about the corporate side of the world, and that's where I think this is a unique combination where we are coming from three different perspectives for the same thing when it comes to it. So when I explained to you the model of like there is a regulator-driven, there is a competition-driven, or there is a customer-driven, or a organization strategic needs-driven, these different models. If we look at the word, and we are interchangeably using here open banking, open finance, and open data. These three different words are getting used. Right? So when we talk about open banking is, if I take more trivial example earlier, it is everything in open banking, data, finance, whatever we're talking about, is about an API. It's a simple interface that you can connect with somebody. And it is standard, it's easy, it's secure. That's the base fundamental of it. And people using Google Map in 2001 was exactly API. Google has introduced it, and then we were using it. But it's public data, that's why it's never called as banking or anything. When it comes to banking, we have used API, or we have modeled API type of implementation is in our payment services. If you remember all e-commerce services and other areas that we went in, plus banks have opened some data for accessibility to outside within that. That's where we started calling it open banking, where banks' data can be used for various aspects. Next came at the point where it is not just data sharing, and we started calling it banking and open finance, where not only data was getting shared, but even the capability was getting shared. And the example that I talked about of white label as an example, where we are not just sharing the data, but we are even sharing the capability of how we can handle your credit card, or any such examples like that. So it became bank as a service internally. You might have heard this word differently in different environment, where people were giving product as a service or cloud as a service. We're giving bank as a service, and bank becomes a provider for many such things. It can be used in multiple use cases. Somebody going to I want a Gucci bag suddenly, and and I'm not a Citi customer, but I see something flashing there that I can get a 10% discount on that. 10% on a Gucci is something that we all will try for. Can I give that customer a card instantly or a loan instantly? Not possible. If let's say that Gucci thing has an access to financial data, and let's assume, since I'm a Citibanker, so I'll say let's say it has access to Citi data, and that customer has some financial records. Or if the customer is with some other bank, then that particular access is available, can I give that card? That becomes the example of an open finance where bank become a service inside, and then it can be used. And now when it starts going beyond finance, then it becomes an open economy or open data, the word that we're using constantly here. What does open data mean? It's not just between the corporate and the financial agencies that we're talking about. Even that everybody has its data open in various shelves. Example, if I give it an example, I think we were talking about it when we met first, is about, let's say, a telco. Today, fraud has become such a bigger risk everywhere, and everything which we are, banking industry as a whole, we are dependent on SMS. And that phone number is like the key to everything. Now, can telco open up their vault and let us identify, if I send a name that this is Niliesh and his number is 9915, can the telcos validate and give it to us? Can Gucci reach out to a payroll system directly without even the financial industry in between that, how much Niliesh earns every month, so can I give that loan to the banking? That's where this becomes an open finance or open data, where the industry as an overall starts going into that world. And we can utilize it for day-to-day purposes. I'm giving financial example only because I come from that industry, but there will be many, many examples, even in general. Like one thing which is, let's say, social, all of us use Line here, China uses WeChat, other areas use, there is enough financial information available in that. Can I use that? It is also a social platform. Can I use the social platforms and do social profiling of customers? I know Nilesh is friend with Chi-wai and Nitin, and they are generally good. I have data from them. Can I do social profiling without getting anything from Nilesh? So those are the type of use cases it will evolve. It will evolve when there is a need, importantly. So where are we today? So we are at stage 2, where at least the industry has opened up within the financial world. Banks have opened up. The government agencies have opened up. We are having access to provident fund data. We are having access to the income tax data. We have access to insurance data. So those are the areas that has opened up. And if you were asking for the vision, I think it's a vision for everybody that as an industry or as a overall environment, we need to reach to a point where instead of now being only in the banking space or within the financial industry, can we make it open for everyone? And there are huge benefits to it. We'll talk about it more when we talk about it in those details. But yes, those are some examples and the vision that Citi is looking at.
Thanks, Niliesh. And maybe because you mentioned that this is not just a concept for finance or finance industry, right? I'd like to understand from Chi-wai, how's it about collaborating with other entities, maybe like you mentioned telcos, but utilities, in driving the innovation for the use of open data?
Yeah, sure. Happy to take this. I think, first of all, Niliesh already covered a lot of different use cases. In particular, for the case about collaborating with some specific entity, maybe take some example here, like telco, utility, or some other financial entities as well. I think one important thing is data is the foundation of everything in the next era, and that's why we have been committed to build the project that I was mentioned, the commercial data interchange, which with the vision of like using data to get some insight to build a better finance services from a finance perspective. Of course, I think digital economy is a bigger topic about how a government can benefit from them. But let's focus on digital, how can data benefit from for the banking industry. the good thing about CDI, the commercial data interchange, is that it's actually very generic. It doesn't specific to any particular types of data. Its use case is actually open. If we can have some kind of like utility data, be it like power consumption of a particular corporate, or water consumption, water supply consumption for a particular corporate, it could be a golden source for a banking to do evaluation against a particular corporate, whether they are doing a great business. For example, if they have never consumed any water or never consumed any power supply for the past 6 months, it could be a bit suspicious, right? So one angle is that from our interview with some banks in Hong Kong, they believe that if we can collaborate CDI with those entities to source those data, that will be a very good use case for them to find out, to identify what could be a good partner or good corporate that they can offer a loan with. That's one particular use case. But of course, there is limitation in Hong Kong as well, because there's not a lot of factory in Hong Kong, honestly. So I guess it could be considered in other jurisdictions, like Thailand. There could be a huge more opportunity of these kind of use cases as well. So telco is another story. We have been actively in discussion with a few telco service provider in Hong Kong as well to see if they can source that data to the commercial data interchange project. They are positive because first of all, banks believe that taking those telco data can help them to identify good customer and bad customer. Or simply, you can imagine address validation is just a very simple use case where we can write on the telco data as well. However, I think one thing we need to be mindful is that when using those data, we always have to get the consent from the appropriate data owner. And another thing we have to be mindful is those entities like telco company, they could be regulated by another authority as well. In Hong Kong, I believe it's the same in other jurisdictions as well. So the use of data, we probably will need to seek those authorities' consent as well, because it seems to be a different use of the purpose of the data. So I'll give a pause here. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I'll just add one thing.
Yes, please.
And I loved while listening itself the address validation, because if you look at from bank's point of view, and I'm thinking as a banker constantly, address validation is such a big use case where if I need to send a plastic, is it reaching the right address? Sometimes somebody changes the address and all things. So even if, let's say, we can use that as one of the use case, what like Chi-wai was explaining, there are many use cases that open data, open banking can bring in. Sorry.
No, I think it's wonderful, and as a banker, you'd be taking every opportunity to see how you can grow business and make the business more secured. I can get that. I think it's important to understand how the landscape is evolving as well, right? As we spoke about, different sectors, we spoke about examples within different sectors. I think one of the key areas that we would like to understand is how is that landscape changing? And maybe, Chi-wai, you want to go first, and maybe Niliesh after?
Yes, sure. I think, like today, I'm happy to be here, but I believe the past few years, it was closed because of the COVID. Yeah, I think I'm honored to be here. But I just want to highlight the fact that COVID actually hinder our physical interaction, but it's actually giving a good push in terms of digitalization and therefore the data landscape as well. Imagine like few years ago, we still have a lot of like cash payment physically by a lot of retailer. But over the past few years, in particular in Hong Kong, I can see that the retailer are willing to accept a lot of e-payment. That actually leave a lot of digital footprints in Hong Kong. Maybe riding on the internet, the e-commerce platform, or the payment, the gateway, etc., etc. So we have a lot of more data than 3 years ago before COVID. So that's number one in terms of the overall landscape. We are actually accelerating because of COVID. So it's a sad story, but happy to take that as a benefit to digitalization. And the second perspective I want to share in terms of landscape is from the bank's perspective. Because I'm working on the commercial data interchange project, I've been interviewing with different banks. And I can hear from banks' voices, actually they are spending a lot of investment trying to build a new SME, like a loan platform in Hong Kong. At least there I can hear more than a few banks that they are willing to do this. Because I believe they are also trying to digitalize their whole process. Like, I think currently a lot of banks are doing loan offering to SME. And right now, the journey is not optimal, honestly. That can last for days or weeks to open an account, and then another days or weeks to actually get a loan, to be signed a credit facility letter, something like that. That will take, I'm not talking about particularly on Citibank, sorry about that. But I think it's generally the efficiency, there is some room to get improved. And I'm seeing banks are willing to invest to make a fully digitalized platform. The will is to get the whole SME loan offering to be done at least within a day or even in hours. So when they meet a client, for example, that's not from HKMA, that's what I heard a story from a banker, just to share. Their will is to, when they meet a client, a potential client, to get a loan, from the time they meet, from the time they left, they want to have the offer letter to be signed. So that's a digital journey with a lot of different use cases that may need data to accelerate. So I'm believing that the landscape is actually accelerating because of COVID. And from banks' perspective, they are willing to invest. I think data will be used more often and often. It's just a little point that I want to add is that not all banks have the power to invest so much. There are different spectrum of bank, bigger bank, medium size, and smaller bank. So I think from what I observe, bigger bank, they have a bigger investment, of course. But for smaller banks, they can still use data, but they may need some data analytics service provider to digest something for the smaller bank to also enjoy the benefit of using data. That's my sharing.
Thank you.
I'll repeat most of the things what Chi-wai has said. I think the key to key to any digitization, generally, if I talked about it, is data. And the data accumulation that is happening now, that's what is evolving the landscape. We have pushed through very quickly from where we were a few years earlier. There were very specific use cases that we were talking about. And it's not just banks. It's everybody in the ecosystem that is realizing the value for it. Even as a customer, when you want to open an account, and you were talking about, we were talking about loan earlier, and you were talking about a corporate getting a loan. But imagine when you wanted to open an account, you have to fill in the entire form. You need to give your KYC data, you need to give your personal information, you need to give all of the information. If it was a credit, then you need to give all those credit information, your credit history and everything. If it was a banking account, you need to walk over to the branch and then open this. Now, that's where sometimes the regulators can play a role, and the Singapore regulator has done an excellent job going into that point. Was they have provided two services importantly, and that's what has accelerated the landscape and evolution of it. One was SingPass. I'm sure there is similar HKPass and things like that, where they made it digital, and that has become a key point for our KYC, know your customers. As long as there is a government data that is validating behind it, it gives us protection in terms of, yes, this is an authentic, this is not a fraud customer, and that has evolved that you don't need to walk into a branch, that I don't need to see Niliesh personally in front of me, take his picture, take his ID copy. No, there is a way we can validate, and those open APIs are available to us. And even if we need to pay, we are okay, because that saves us so much. Second is the My Info, related information, where it is not just KYC. When you want to onboard a customer, you want to know their credit history, you want to know their pension, you want to know how much income tax they were paying, plus some personal information, name, father's name, mother's maiden name, whatever, general banking information, which were getting filled by person individually. Those are the type of things where a regulatory push has come in, and there is an infrastructure built by the regulator, which we have consumed, and every bank now, it's nothing unique to Singapore or Citibank, every bank in Singapore is now opening account remotely. That's the impact and that's the evolution. That's how the landscape is changing, where branches are becoming more of, I would say, advisory places. You don't need to walk into a branch for your day-to-day needs, even for account opening. Unless you want to invest, you want to have a discussion with your advisor or RMs, what you want to do. That also can be done remotely. Obviously, there is Zoom facility, videos are available, but at least there is a physical touch. People feel comfortable about it when you want to invest $1 million in it. So that comes in, but the landscape is changing so quickly. So at some places, I think, a regulatory mandate pushing or into that area that this how it has to be used can help the organization and the environment and the overall ecosystem itself that let's elevate everybody to open banking.
No, it's very, very interesting. And maybe, the next logical question that people have in the mind is how do you incentivize? How do you incentivize providers? And how do you incentivize consumers to be able to adopt open data? Because everyone wants to control their data for their purposes, which is fair, but we are talking about open data. So in a sense, what we are saying is we are giving away the advantage of knowing what we know as a common information to others, right? As businesses or as consumers who want to protect their privacy, right? So really the question is, how do we make that information or how do we get people informed, as consumers as informed, as well as providers to be incentivized to, share the data? So maybe something we can again start with maybe Niliesh as a provider. Okay. What do you feel? What would be the ways?
I'll take it to a different level altogether, okay? Don't do innovation for the sake of innovation. There's a lot of technology available. People are there are technologists who want to experiment, who will do the things. Unless you have a use case. And that's where I'll repeat something I just responded. Like, I had a use case that I want my KYC to be completed. I had a use case that I need customers' information to be there. I'll have few more use cases of a phone number from a telco coming in. As long as we solve. So if any product will be successful, only either it eliminates the inefficiencies in a particular flow or makes the customer experience better. Get into customer's shoe. And it can be partner, it not necessarily end customer itself. It's more about, if there is an inefficiency, there are many. I mean, like, every process needs upliftment with time, with technology, availability, it will change. So the incentive, to me, that word actually is try and address an issue. Don't just use technology for the sake of using technology, that this technology is available, so I want to use it, and it will be good in my CV. No, don't go for that. It is more important that if you solve a real customer problem, it will automatically become used. I'll repeat which I said just 2 minutes ago. As a bank, we are more than happy to pay even a regulator if they are charging me for SingPass validation, they are charging me for my info validations, but I don't mind. First thing, the account opening process, which was 5 days, has come to instant. Second, I don't need to keep paper records. I don't need to put human resources behind it. So the revenue model will automatically develop when we take out the inefficiencies from the system. So to me, incentive is solve a customer problem. Customers will automatically come and start using it.
Okay. I try to listen to Niliesh advice to put myself into a customer's shoes. So let me just put off my head as a regulator or facilitator in the HKMA. So if I'm a customer to a bank, if I was asked, could you be willing to share your data so that your loan offering is like 1% less than the traditional way of lending, then I'm more than happy to do so, right? So I guess if you are talking about incentive, how to incentivize a customer to use the data, to share the data. So I guess a better loan product or some other product, financial product, with a more competing edge could potentially incentivize a customer. So now let me put back my head as a facilitator or regulator as HKMA. So I guess that also have another angle to discuss as well. From my perspective, to incentivize a bank to share data, we probably will need to put the shoes into a bank's perspective as well. So as a regulator, I think we can try to define some kind of like standard or even to develop a platform for the banks to do easier connectivity so that they can get data easily. They don't have to like struggle. How can I get data A, data B, and data C to do different types of connectivity? That will be very time consuming and tedious for the bank. So I think there is some role that the regulator or market facilitator can play is to help the bank to get data easily and make it available for the banks to use. Even better is we can consider to digest some insight for the bank as well, to build some kind of like analytic work for the bank to use. Of course, the bank can choose to build it on their own as well. So that will be the interdependency on how the customer relies on the banks and the banks relies on the regulator or even the government. As I mentioned at the very beginning, that the government data, like the Inland Revenue data, company registry data, that will be also very valuable as well. If we can get all these available easily, that can incentivize the bank eventually to the customers.
No, that's wonderful. I think the next question really that comes in my mind is how does one ensure that the data is being ethically used? Now that you have so much data, you have data of your competition, maybe in terms of the customers that they hold, because you know that they could be banking with other customers, the banks, for example, or as a consumer, right? We share that data knowingly with consent, right? But how do you ensure that the data is being used ethically? And I know there's governance around it. There's regulations that have been put forward as well for banks on how to use data ethically. So question would be, what is, let's say, the HKMA doing in that regard? And maybe from a provider standpoint, how do you ensure that this is put into practice, right?
Yeah, let me start first. I think there are different levels of like ethics and data protection, for example. Over the past decade, we have been seeing a lot of initiative like the GDPR from European region, and similar initiative in Hong Kong as well, like we call the PDPO, which is Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, which is on a top level to try to safeguard the data privacy for individual and potentially corporates as well for the use of data. So I guess it's always good to see something that had already happened at the top level. But from a system or data use, data governance perspective, which is the second level, I think we also need to be mindful that when we build, as I mentioned, we are building a platform, the commercial data interchange, or even the open API framework in the HKMA. We also have to be mindful that we need to define the corresponding data governance, which is very important. Likely, I'd like to share that, for the CDI, we have defined some rules, framework for the CDI participant, including the banks, the data provider, which could be a telco, which could be a payment gateway, for them to follow on how data could be used and how a consent has to be collected by the corresponding customer, including, for example, the data, the purpose of the use of data, the data retention period, and also data scope, for example. Most importantly, I think it's the capability for the customer to revoke that particular consent if they don't want to share the data with a particular bank, for example, any longer. So when we design a system or platform, a data platform for the use of data, we have to factor in these as well in terms of data governance. And I think for our CDI, taking it as an example, we have already built in this feature for the customers to grant the particular banks to use a particular data for over, for example, 1 year of time. And if they are not willing to share any longer, they can choose to revoke that particular consent, and the bank will no longer have access to the data provider anymore. So I think that's important to give confidence for the customers to use data if we have the legal level and also the data governance on a system level.
I think you have answered most of it, and I'll say we have to join hands on that. I think as simple as that, because I think and I'll come to the customer's point of it, but from an organization's point of view, if a regulation comes and it defines the guidelines that that's how it has to be done, it becomes an industry practice, and that not only ethically, but sometimes even because of the reprobate that will come together with it, all those things will put a barrier on the organization that it is important to comply with this. From a customer's point of view, I think you have said few things, and I'll add, like, there has to be transparency. Why are you asking me for the data? What data are you asking? Where you'll use it? Where you'll give it to me? Second would be like, get consent clearly. And when we talk about get consent clearly, it is, many times it is hidden. Just I've put a checkbox somewhere that I'll be using this data. It's not known to customer. So to have that trust from customer's point of view, ensure that it is transparently and properly taken that this data is going to be used for it. Even if there is no guideline, try and collect minimal data to give that confidence to customer that this data that I am taking is whatever is needed. I don't need even a bit extra from you. Point you made about, should customer have the choice of revoking that? And can there be a general portal either at a common level or even within the organization level where customer can log in and say, okay, I had given this consent and maybe now I don't need it. I was okay to share it. Like, it's almost like delegation that we give in our own organization, that during my holiday somebody can approve, but after that I come back and revoke those delegations. So those level of controls, once we start giving it to customers, it will certainly make them confident that we can share the data with the respective organization, and the overarching regulation around it will ensure the organization that they deal with that properly. I think that's how we can build that confidence in customers to share data with us.
That makes sense. I think the other aspect is, and nobody would doubt it, that a lot of countries today, financial inclusion is one of the key challenges, right? We have diverse set of population, regional banks may not be able to reach some of the customers via a branch, all right, or a physical location. What would be interesting to understand is, what are the effective strategies to be able to use the benefit of open data to be able to also address the financial inclusion objective? So maybe Niliesh, you want to try that first?
Okay, I'll try it from a different angle. I think most importantly, I think when we talk about financial inclusions, I'll go towards underbanked more. I think that's a segment, because obviously we can go with specially enabled or different categories and all those things. But more importantly, and the example I'll go for, the way open banking, open data can help is, and I'll go back to my China examples during my days. No, like not the entire population have banking accounts, but everybody has a WeChat account. And then can WeChat actually become the bank? They opened a bank internally as well as WeBank, and they got the license for it. But even before that, can that be used for financial inclusion? Bring people into the financial system. It's not necessarily to have them with bank. It is more importantly, are they dealing in the financial system rather than are they dealing with the bank? And open data is the silver bullet or the golden bullet, whatever you would want to call it, is that where, and WeChat is just one example. There are people who are in different areas, different fields. There will be corporates, there will be SMEs, where there are wage workers and other scenarios. Can we just bring them into financial system through this open data? We can provide them bank as a service internally if they are really not willing to come to the bank. Can they start using those QR code payments? Can they start using those activities? So that's the advantage as an overall economy that we'll get, where we can bring in those underbanked, unserved customer into a financial domain, and slowly it will build them their profile as well. So if somebody is spending $1,000 a month, we roughly know that when he needs a $500 loan at some point, they don't need to come to the bank. The same WeChat or same corporate, they know that they can do for that. So it's not just financial inclusion, even in their hardships or sometimes even in a real need, they want loan. This open data sharing between various entities can help bring in all those underserved, underprivileged people to come into a financial system, not banking. I mean, like, I'm just trying to differentiate between the two. We want everybody to bank with us, and every bank wants that customer have an account. But that's my strategic objective. But when we look as a country, we don't want everybody to be banking. We just want that they are financially secure and they are in the financial system. And open data is one answer that can help us solve that problem.
Thank you. You have brought up a very good example, but I will share another example in the Hong Kong landscape as well. But first of all, I think in Hong Kong, the landscape is a bit different because a lot of the customers are actually quite well served when we talk about financial inclusion. But I am still able to share a case where we do interview with banks about the data projects. And I've been told that traditionally, if customers, they want to borrow some loans, for example, to expand their business, in that case, the corporates probably will be asked to give some collateral, such as a property in Hong Kong. Because the property market in Hong Kong has a very unique nature. And it's, for some reason, very attractive to bankers. So as long as they can provide a property as a collateral, banks are willing to offer a loan. So that's a very traditional way of SME financing in Hong Kong. So that's actually one of the reasons why we had started to explore about using data to enable financial inclusion. Because we want business to expand, even they don't have a property to be as a collateral. Because not all the startup, all the corporates, they essentially have a property. In particular, the property in Hong Kong are so expensive. So we started to think about using data to replace collateral, which is more intuitive, right? When I ask for money, I don't necessarily have a collateral. So in that case, we started to work on the commercial data exchange to get data as a very important element. But when you ask what's the strategy to get financial inclusion, first is to get data. But then right now we have the data. How we can make the banks or the customer to use it. I think we have already discussed all throughout all the questions, like how to incentivize the customers to use data, how to incentivize the bank. The most important factor that I think is we have a various of strategy. Number one is we have to a good data infrastructure provided by either the bank or the governments so that they can trust to use it. If it's not a trust data infrastructure, I think leakage or cybersecurity could come into another angle where people will not be willing to share data effectively. So data infrastructure is number one. And I think I share the availability to make it available, to make the data available and to diversify the types of data could be another strategy that we can strike for better data and therefore better financial inclusion. And lastly, with those data available, I think banks has a role as well to innovate new products that attract the customer to use these products. So collectively, a data ecosystem will be working hand in hand with a different roles.
I'll just add one point which just came to my mind while I was listening to him. Like the QR code payment, and I think every country has adopted it. The mom and pop shop, or normally what we call the mini marts, normally which is there, they were normally dealing in cash only. They were not coming into financial inclusion. But with the QR code payment and no fee to them because they cannot afford it, that made the model where the money is now directly going into the banking system and they are part of the financial inclusion rather than just, again, dealing into cash and remaining out of that.
No, it's a very important example of how financial inclusion has happened through the use of open data. Maybe another could be a sensitive question. or challenging question to answer at this stage. But what would be the pricing models for, let's say, a provider who wants to participate in the open data, as well as from an affordability of a customer standpoint, in case the customers were charged for the use of open data by financial services, for example. So, yeah, that's why I said it's challenging. So
it's not challenging, and I'll go back to the answer one which I have given. Most important is solve a use case. People don't mind paying money. We go and eat in a 5-star hotel as well, and we eat on the roadside as well. It's not the cost that deters the usage. It is important that you're trying to solve a customer problem, and then the pricing will come into play. Pricing models are various, and I think this is not unique to open banking, or it is the basic partnership model that we are doing even in co-branding or even the white labeling, where either there is a flat fee that you give me X million dollars every year and then I'll serve you. It can be per transaction, that every transaction that, or the associate banking model that we work with cards, every transaction has a fee you can work with. Third model is the Google model. It's called freemium, something that they call, which is like free for first million hits. But if you start using it more, then I'll start charging you. So I incentivize in a way that if you are a small player, it's okay to have it available for you in free, and then increase it to a model where if you are becoming a bigger user, then at least help me maintain my infrastructure and build my revenue book. So there can be various models. This is, yes, nobody is doing charity, especially when it comes, regulator might be, but we will not. So yes, there at the end of it, some money has to come into play. But I think if we start giving the right customer issues, addressing them, and then charging internally with whatever model we want, revenue sharing and others, it can fly through.
You can see that it's not a challenging question to Niliesh because he's from a commercial world. It's definitely a challenging question to me, whether as a layman or as a role as a facilitator in the HKMA. We are always not good at pricing model. But having said that, because we have been working on a data platform, the commercial data interchange platform, we actually appointed a consultancy firm to do a research study on pricing model. What could be a potential pricing model for our platform, etc., etc. So I'm willing to share a little bit here. So collectively, I think the consultancy firm has given two types of extreme model for us. The name is party room model. The other one is the buffet model, where party room model, it's like the data platform, where HKMA, doesn't really actively participate in agreeing a price directly with the data provider and the data consumer. It's more like a bilateral agreement between the data consumer, data provider itself. As a data infrastructure provider, HKMA, we only kind of like charge a small fee to maintain the operation of the particular data platform. So that's the party room model. It's just like to rent a party room for the participants to play around here with the data platform. So that's number one. The number two is the buffet model. It's really like a buffet, where a data consumer, they pay a membership fee to subscribe on a particular data services from a data provider. So the subscription doesn't really go to the data provider directly. Instead, it goes to a central pool maintained to be operated by the HKMA, for example. And all the data providers, depending on their contribution to the data in the platform, using, for example, a counter, they will know a percentage of the subscription fee they can redeem from the pool. So that takes a balance of for the consumer and provider to pay to a central pool, whether you pay it and you subscribe it on your go. So that's a party. So that's a buffet model. Sorry, as I said, I'm not good at this pricing model. I'm trying to give to present the report of the consultancy study. But these are the two ends that we have analyzed that can be done, in particular for a data platform. Having said that, we didn't really apply these pricing model because we are still at a very initial stage driving adoption. So we are not charging anything right now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Chi-wai, maybe if I may ask, right? So different regulators have different ways in which they are sharing with the, let's say, the providers, with the consumers, the ways of using open data. What's, let's say, HKMA's view, and how do you are looking at making this, more at scale in Hong Kong, for example, maybe across sectors? Can you just give us your model in which you are trying to operate at the moment of making open data informative to the consumers, for example, as well as to maybe the providers?
Sure. I think our vision at the end game is like we want to enable data sharing, be it within the bank or from the commercial data, government data to the banks to enable different use case. Right now, we have been in the discussion with a lot of government agencies to share different government data. By the end of this year, we will be able to source the company registries data to the CDI platform so that the bank can start. The bank in Hong Kong can start to get the company's registry data directly from the CDI platform. The good thing about it is you may arguably say traditionally the corporate actually can get the company registry data in a paper form and send it to the bank. Yes, that's actually doable. But with a golden source of copy directly through an API from the company registry database to CDI and then to the bank, I think that's a golden source of data with the legitimacy telling that there is no fault case. That's all a golden source. And it's also raising the efficiency without the paper to do a manual check. You can write on those API with a lot of machine readable information to finish the KYC use case as we all discussed already within hours or even within minutes. So that's a completely different story than the previous traditional way to do an eyeball check on those information. When you ask about cross-sector, yes, we are also exploring not only on financial sector, not only on banking sector. We are starting some collaboration with other authorities in Hong Kong, like the insurance authority, because we believe different types of insurance data, like the medical data from a corporate, whether they have the installment or not, could be also a very good use case for the banks to estimate, to proxy the health status of the corporate as well. So I don't think there is any border to stop the use of data or share of data, in particular on CDI. As I always highlight, the more data, the more diversity, the better it will be, as long as it can fit the purposes of different use cases for the bank's innovation.
No, thanks. I think it's about time. I'm sure we could go for another hour if we had to. But let me thank Niliesh and Chi-wai here. And just to maybe summarize some of the key points that I heard. A, don't do innovation for the sake of doing innovation. Right? Do it for a particular use case. And open data has multiple use cases that could be relevant for providers and consumers. I like the other word, which is a silver bullet. It's a silver bullet for financial inclusion, which I think a lot of countries are facing challenges with, so it really helps. I think what Chi-wai also mentioned is that it's not just banking sector, but it's a collaboration of multiple sectors to be able to get to that real use cases for open data. With that, let me thank you once again, and thanks for your patience to hear us all here.
Thank you. Thank you.